Welcome to HEC Economics Made Easy. This video is part of a series on the global economy. Previously, I looked at some of the costs and benefits of free trade. Today, I'll be focusing on the impacts of protectionist strategies. Just like in my previous video, I recommend that you get familiar with the concepts from topics 2, 3, and 4 because I'll be drawing from those topics. In particular, it'll be highly beneficial if you're familiar with the 3 types of efficiencies. Check out my videos on aggregate supply and microeconomic reform to see me make those concepts easy for you. Alright, let's get into today's topic. Firstly, what are protectionist strategies? The protectionist strategies that we must learn in the HEC course include tariffs, quotas, subsidies, local content rules, and export incentives. I'll cover those in more detail in my next video. Suffice to say, protectionist strategies are government policies aimed at giving artificial advantages to domestic industries over foreign competition. Why does the government use such strategies? Here are some reasons. So in my last video, I pointed out that increased foreign competition can cause inefficient domestic industries to decline, leading to job loss. So here's our first reason for protection: to prevent domestic unemployment. This is one of the more obvious reasons, but it's considered by many economists to be a weak reason because of its short-sightedness. If you watched my previous video, you'll have learned that this structural unemployment is only short-term. It only lasts until these workers get allocated to more efficient industries, which will benefit consumers. More on this later. The next reason is called the infant industry argument. New businesses and industries may face many difficulties. Because of their small size, they would not have yet achieved economies of scale to compete with larger foreign competitors. Therefore, the infant industry argument is that governments should temporarily support them with protectionist strategies to give them a larger market share, at least until they can compete. The third reason for protection is to prevent dumping. Dumping is when foreign firms sell their products to our economy at unsustainably low prices. Consumers may be happy in the short term, thinking that we've gotten a great bargain, until our domestic industries die out and prices go back up again. Think predatory pricing, but at an international level. Just like how the ACCC enforces against such anti-competitive behavior to maintain fair competition in Australia, our domestic government may use protectionist strategies to combat dumping by foreign firms. The fourth and final reason for protection is defense and self-sufficiency. There are certain goods and services that cannot be outsourced to or imported from another nation, no matter how cheaply or efficiently it could be produced overseas, usually for national security reasons. For example, China may have a massive population and could spare a few soldiers to us, but we're probably better off relying on our own defense force funded by our own government, right? Another example is having our own food rather than importing it all. If diplomatic relations ever go sour and we stop trading, we wouldn't worry about starving, as we're self-sufficient. Obviously, this is a non-economic and a bit of a wartime argument. There are also other reasons not in the syllabus, such as ethical arguments. Free trade can allow advanced economies to bypass their own labor, environmental, or animal welfare laws as they move production to countries with more relaxed standards. It can also be harder to detect and take legal action against unethical behavior across borders. Again, this is a non-economic argument to restrict trade. You may also hear politicians cite the bogs or trade deficit as a reason for protection. They may argue that it affects our external stability, as well as our aggregate demand and unemployment. So those are some arguments for protection. There are some criticisms against those arguments, as well as some costs associated with protection. Let's take a look at some of these. Again, protection is giving an artificial advantage to domestic firms, sometimes inefficient ones. Sure, we may protect domestic employment in the short term, but we'd be missing out on many of the benefits of free trade that I highlighted last lesson. One of the most important ones being a lack of allocative efficiency. Protectionist strategies allocate resources to an inefficient industry that consumers may not actually want and probably does not have comparative advantage. This means that we're missing out on improvements in standard of living, increased aggregate supply, and international competitiveness. Infant industries often end up relying on protection over time. This causes them to lack incentive to be productive, as well as innovate and adapt. A lack of productivity means lower technical efficiency, higher prices, and again, lower standards of living and competitiveness. A lack of innovation means no structural change. This leads to lower dynamic efficiency, and again, the consumer misses out and businesses stay uncompetitive. Also, when one country uses protectionist strategies, competing nations usually retaliate. You probably have heard of the US-China trade war, where Trump used tariffs to retaliate against China's protectionist strategies over the years, such as devaluing their currency. A more underreported but widespread example is the protection of the food industry across the world. Agricultural subsidies are a drain on government budgets, meaning that the fiscal resources could have gone elsewhere in each economy. But governments use them anyway, partly due to the retaliation effect. Sure, it appears to lower prices for consumers, but this is problematic for developing nations that lack the fiscal resources for subsidies. they can't compete globally and lose market share. As a result, they lack national income and stay in the poverty cycle. So global inequality worsens because of protection. As a side note, the trade deficit argument for protection can also be refuted. If you have covered topic 2 or external stability, then you may have already learned that the trade deficit is not necessarily a bad thing. Not only does it represent imports that enhance consumer choice, but it's historically never been a problem in Australia. Economist Milton Friedman also argues that it gets cancelled out by the floating exchange rate. That is, when we're in a trade deficit, we're spending more on imports than exports, and this causes our dollar to depreciate, boosting our international competitiveness and eventually reducing our trade deficit. So in this video, I've presented some arguments for protection, as well as some problems associated with it. In my next video, I'm going to go into detail about the specific methods of protection, as well as their impacts. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, as well as follow us on Facebook to make sure you don't miss that. If this video has helped you, please leave a like and comment, as well as share the video too. And I look forward to continuing to make HEC economics easy for you. See you next time.